In the first 2 weeks of this series, we looked at a story of Jesus saving a dinner party with a miracle, and then we looked at Jesus accepting Zacchaeus at a dinner table and offering him grace. But sitting at the dinner table with Jesus is not always an easy or fun thing to do. The dinner table is a place where hard conversations happen too. Jesus loved and embraced and forgave people, but he also challenged them. He called them out and corrected them when they needed correction. He knew the dinner table was a place where tough but necessary conversations could happen, where Jesus could be totally honest with us, even if it's something we might not want to hear. I remember one evening as a teenager when I was not excited to go to the dinner table with my parents. I had just turned 14. I got my school permit driver's license, meaning I could drive to school and back all by myself. There was one rule: you cannot have other students in the car with you. Well, that first day, everyone thought it was pretty cool that I could drive to school, and everyone wanted a ride home. I'd like to say they really peer pressured me, but in all honesty, I was a more than willing participant in this plan. So after school, 4 friends piled into my Honda Accord, and I drove everyone home. And I quickly learned that day, no matter how sneaky or smooth you think you're being as a teenager, your parents always find out. My dad knew before I even got home that night. So there I was sitting in my room, dreading dinner time, knowing that there was going to be a conversation with some scolding, new rules, and consequences. And as a parent now, I know that my parents weren't being mean over dinner that night. They wanted what was best for me. They wanted to keep me safe, and if they saw me doing something reckless that could get me and others hurt, they had to address that. That's what Jesus does at the dinner table for us this week. We're looking at a story of Jesus giving some tough, honest, necessary correction and advice to a group of Pharisees. These Pharisees were religious leaders. They were tasked with knowing and enforcing religious laws in the community. Although they were believed to be religious experts, they were often at odds with the Son of God. At dinner, the Pharisees quickly had a critique for Jesus. He sat down to eat without performing the hand-washing ritual that was required by law. Before the Pharisees could call Jesus out, though, he had some words for them. He said, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools, didn't God make the inside as well as the outside?" Jesus was calling them out for not having integrity. Integrity is when our outward lives accurately and authentically reflect our inner reality. The Pharisees projected this nice, clean, holy exterior of good works and the right answers. But inside, Jesus knew that they were full of greed, selfishness, and pride, and that they didn't really understand God's word as well as they thought they did. Jesus tells them, "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees?" At first glance, this passage sounds really angry, but really this isn't as much a harsh scolding as it is a warning. There will be sorrow if you continue living this way. Jesus is trying to help them avoid this future pain. So he goes on. "For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest bit of income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God." Their outward action was tithing, but Jesus knew the inner reality was wanting to appear righteous and better than others. The inner reality was pride. And then Jesus gives them another example. "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive all the respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplace, but you're actually full of corruption." And they wanted these important seats of honor and good reputations, but they weren't living lives deserving of it. They were not living with integrity. And Jesus tells them, you need to focus on the inside and care as much about getting that mess cleaned up as you care about polishing the parts that everybody sees. Now, Jesus cares more about our inner reality because he knows that if there's a mess on the inside, it will eventually spill out into our outward words and actions, no matter how often you polish the exterior. Let's say you're angry with a coworker. You can use kind words and play nice to their face, but if you don't deal with the conflict and the anger going on inside, it will eventually spill out into your relationship with them. Maybe you spent your Saturday morning serving others or helping a friend, but you really only did it to impress other people. And on the inside, you're pretty resentful about the whole thing because you wanted to do something else that weekend. That bitterness will spill out into how we treat the people we're there to serve. Maybe you're struggling with anxiety, but you don't want anyone to know, so you do your best to project this perfect person who's got everything under control until you don't. What's going on inside rarely stays inside. It will eventually work its way into other areas of our life. And the Pharisees were very concerned about outward appearances and actions. They had turned religion into a system of do's and don'ts instead of a relationship with God. They did everything right. They appeared to be all put together, but Jesus knew inside they were a mess, spiritually, emotionally, and relationally. Jesus cared more about what was going on inside of them than the misleading outward appearances and actions they were projecting. The Pharisees had good intentions. They wanted to be close to God, but their strategy for doing that was completely backwards. The Pharisees believed God wanted good actions and right behavior and head knowledge, and Jesus is trying to tell them at the dinner table, God just wants your heart. Your actions are often right, but your motivation is all wrong. The Pharisees gave out of obligation and in fear of repercussions. They gave so that they could brag later about how much they gave. And this was doing nothing to change their hearts. This type of giving was not growing their compassion for other people. It was only growing their own feelings of superiority. Now, sometimes we think and live a lot more like the Pharisees than Jesus. We believe that being a Christian means saying and doing all the right things, and that if we want to grow closer to God, we need to start doing more things and doing them better. And if we do all those right things, God will accept us, but if we mess up, we're going to be in big trouble. If someone asked you, what does it look like to be a good Christian? We would probably say, well, never miss church, go on the mission trip, be nice, don't say bad words, post a Bible verse on your Instagram. But it's not what we do that matters, it's why we do it. God doesn't want us to serve out of obligation. He wants us to serve because we have genuine compassion for people. God doesn't want us to begrudgingly give because we're supposed to. He wants us to give cheerfully because we understand the power of generosity. God doesn't want us to just be nice to people because it's the right thing to do. He wants us to truly have love for them and for that love to flow naturally in our words and actions. We know how to clean the outside of the cup, but we're not always sure how to deal with the big mess that's on the inside. Jesus tells the Pharisees to clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor. With tithe, that was required, but a gift, this was a free will offering, it was optional. A tithe went through the religious organization, and Jesus' suggestion invites the Pharisees to actually interact with people in need, maybe even get to know them. Jesus is suggesting something that is going to help them grow in love and compassion, hopefully develop some humility. It wasn't just a rule to be followed, it was an opportunity to change their hearts. And if we really want to experience change this Lent, if we really want our lives to start to change and look different, we have to start inside and be intentional about changing and growing there first, because those inner changes will start to spill out into our lives too. Jesus didn't tell the Pharisees to give up their good works. He said you should tithe, but do not neglect the more important things. And the more important things are the things happening in our hearts, our motivations, our feelings, our passions, our faith. So what needs to change inside in order for you to live with more integrity? What struggle or challenge is happening inside that you've been trying to ignore or hide or sweep under the rug in order to keep up appearances? As we go back to our groups, we'll discuss how we can intentionally clean the inside of the cup. I hope you all have a meaningful discussion.